I'm Lynn Clayton, co-chair of the Wish Midlands. I'd just like to welcome you to this session on the kind of role of carers and how we show support for carers within the housing sector. So I've got with me today Hayley Charlesworth, who is the founder of Harry's Pals, the Helping Harry's Trust, who has worked alongside Longhurst Housing Association, and we've got Lynn Stubbs from Longhurst here to kind of go through the pledge. And I think where Hayley's come from as a mother of a child with severe disabilities, kind of coming up against barriers of getting into work and how carer-friendly organisations are. So the idea behind the pledge was for organisations to pledge to be more carer-friendly, I think is how I describe it. I don't know if any of you have seen it before. There has been quite a few sessions on this, and there's already, so it's had the backing of Inside Housing, CIH, Place Shapers, and there's probably around 30 or 40 organisations that have signed up now, but our kind of aim is to get as many signed up as possible and bring the kind of carer aspect of employing carers, but also having carers that work for you into the kind of vision of organisations and into their culture. And I think where Wish are coming from as well is the fact that what we find is, and I think it's not always the case, but a lot of the caring falls on women. So I kind of, from our perspective, it's wanted to champion this with organisations. Obviously, we're an organisation that support women. Not that we don't support men at all, Rob, but as well, Rob. But our kind of raison d'etre is to kind of break down the stereotypes and get women on an equal footing in the sector. So, without me babbling on anymore, I'd like to introduce Hayley, who is just going to give you her perspective of what brought her to where we are now with the pledge. So welcome, Hayley.
Hi everyone. Hi, great to see you all. Thanks for inviting me today, Lynn. It's a pleasure to talk to you all. I just want to tell you a little bit about my background and sort of how that relates to Harry's pledge. So Harry is my son. He's 5 years old now. Harry has severe disabilities. He's got quadriplegic cerebral palsy, which means that he's got no control from his arms and legs. Basically, his muscle tone has been impaired because of damage to his brain. He's also got visual impairments. He's registered blind. He's completely tube fed. He has oxygen overnight. He's non-verbal and cognitively around the age of a 3-month-old. This is because he suffered strokes on both sides of his brain prior to being born. We didn't know there was anything wrong with Harry throughout the pregnancy. It was only the day after he was born, when he started to have seizures, that we knew there was something wrong. So he was taken down to neonatal, where they did lots of different tests. They did blood tests, lumbar punctures. They didn't know whether it was an infection or virus. At one point they thought maybe meningitis. And after days of seizures and trying to get them under control and various different tests, they did an EEG and then finally an MRI scan. And then a few more days after that, we was ushered into a side room with a notice on the door that said, "Do not disturb." And I thought, oh God, this is going to be bad news. And they held out the MRI scan, which is an image of Harry's brain. And they said, "You see all the areas that are white? These are all the areas of Harry's brain that have been damaged." So we looked at it and the whole image was white. So it was traumatic. And then he just went on to say, you know, Harry could end up with cerebral palsy. I must admit, I was completely ignorant at the time and didn't even know what cerebral palsy was. He could probably end up with speech, and everything that I've told you that Harry sadly has been affected by. Yeah, his prognosis. And he just said, you know, these are the things that might happen with Harry. This is how he might turn out. But just go home and wait and see. See when he gets to 6 months old, see if he starts to crawl. Wait until he gets to a year old, see if he starts to walk. And after 3 months old, Harry didn't roll over. After 6 months old, you know, he wasn't sitting, and we just waited and waited. But it was the first sort of few months that were really hard, because we were sent home, and Harry got a lot of support in terms of OTs, physios, health visitors coming to visit him. But as parents, we didn't receive any support, which was surprised me, because I thought that we'd get like a support worker or a mentor or something, but there was nothing. And given the fact that we'd had this trauma happen to us, we were both probably really suffering with PTSD. We had a two-year-old daughter, Lily, as well, that we had to look after. And then we had this enormous challenge of looking after a child with severe disabilities. There's no book on how to look after a child with brain damage. There's not a lot of support out there. So it was really hard. And I mean, I'm not just telling you all this because it's, you know, to be self-indulgent, but it's really why I've decided I wanted to set up Harry's Pals, because Harry's Pals is about supporting parents that have a child with severely disabled or poorly children, as well as like carers on the whole, and disabled people too. So after sort of 5 years and finally managing to get some support from myself and my husband, and we managed to find counsellors and get that emotional support, it's left me thinking, well, what can I do? How can I turn what's happened to us, this, you know, life-changing thing that's happened to us, and to make it into a positive thing? So in Harry's name, I thought, we want to set up Harry's Pals so that we can offer support to other parents to try and help even just a few families to not feel the way that we have. So Harry's Pals does 4 different things. It offers respite breaks, so they're week-long breaks or long weekends, partnering up with hospices so that their child is already taken care of, so that they've got that free time where they can go away with either their partner or their other children who might want a bit of mum and dad time, because having a child with severe special needs is very time consuming, and without willing, you sometimes don't spend as much time with your other children as you would like to. So it's sending them to maybe spa weekends, or just recently a family have been to Norfolk, and one has had a countryside retreat break, which they've really enjoyed. It's not to be underestimated as well, the power of knowing that you've got a break coming up, especially like with the coronavirus and things, just to be able to think, well, I just have to get to, as soon as we knew that the breaks were safe to go ahead, think I've just got to get to September and then I've got that break. Sometimes it can get you through the day. We're also offering therapy and counselling, so making sure that's bespoke to the family is what's going to work for them. So for some people that might be that they just want somebody else to talk things through. They might not feel as though they can talk to their family because they're going through it as well, to a degree. Or it might be looking at therapy and trying to find coping mechanisms, which is certainly what's worked for me in the past. So having a child with or a carer in general, looking after anybody, it is an emotional roller coaster, and you've gotten over one thing and then it might be something else comes up, or a new diagnosis. So having a little sort of toolkit in terms of coping mechanisms, and there's all sorts that counsellors and therapists can do, and hypnotherapy and EFT and things is invaluable at times. The third thing is about partnering up families that are new to having a child or with disabilities, with families that are further down the line that can provide their advice, make sure that they're getting the support that they should be, whether that's just practical advice in terms of like carers allowance, or whether it's about emotional support as well, and just basically there to sort of hold their hand in a way and try and help them through, and give them their wisdom that they've learned over the years. And the fourth thing, the final thing, is campaigning. So, and that's where it's not just about children, but it's about disabilities as a whole, and carers, and making sure that they're getting the support that they deserve. And I think if anything, now's the perfect time. We've had coronavirus, and we've all sort of stood and clapped on the doorsteps and acknowledged how important they are. So I think now's a perfect opportunity for us to say, you know, carers are out there. They do an amazing job. In some ways, they're providing the backbone of our country, and just doing all we can to support them and keep the ball rolling, really. So and also for disabled people too, making sure that they're getting the equipment that they need, whether it's changing places toilets, which are basically can mean the difference between going out and not going out. Especially in my case, Harry's severely disabled. He can't sit on a normal loo. If we have to go out, then we have to think, oh well, where can we change him? We can't just put him on a baby changing table anymore. He's 5, but he's a very big 5. So we have to plan ahead, and sadly in a lot of cases we can't go to a zoo that Lily wants to go to, or a park, because there's not the facilities for Harry. So it either means that he's missing out, or the girls or my other children are missing out. And I think it leaves a lot of people housebound. You know, there's a lot of people out there who are very cognitively abled as well, but they just can't use the toilet. So imagine the indignity of not being able to being worried about that, and not being able to go places that you'd like to, and you're being invited to. So there's a lot of different areas. There's so many different areas to campaign. But Harry's Pledge, I'm really proud of it. It's amazing thing to have in Harry's name. I know Lynn said as well that there's between 30 to 40 housing associations signed up for it at the moment, which is fantastic. And I think it's going to make a massive difference. The area I'm particularly interested in is the first area is how employees can help support their carers, make their carers more, their organisations more carer friendly. So I have been going into organisations and doing a little bit of consultancy work with them, and looking at the carers, and then but you know, all of it, just to be working with housing associations to do what we can for disabled people and carers, is very exciting. And I'm going to leave it now to Lynn to discuss the 4 commitments. But yeah, thank you for listening.
Okay, thanks Hayley. You happy for me to carry on, Lynn, as our chair? So I'm Lynn Stubbs, and I'm Exec Director of People and Performance at Longhurst Group. I've actually known Hayley for quite a lot of years, before Harry was born actually. So I've seen quite firsthand the devastation to the family of having a child with such profound disabilities. And as a parent myself, it's really hard to imagine the prospect of losing a child and the impact of that on your mental health. And I'm sure you'll all agree from hearing Hayley today, you know, she's a pretty inspirational person, and from all the challenges she's faced and faces on a daily basis, and quite an uncertain future with Harry, she set up Harry's Pals to use all that sort of wisdom and experience to provide a lifeline to parents of children who are critically ill or severely disabled. And I think it really helps you see life through quite a different lens, knowing and talking to people like Hayley, and it really raises your awareness of disability issues. I thought it was something I was quite knowledgeable about and sort of understood, but I think it's really given me quite a different perspective, talking to Hayley more since Harry's been born. And I think that looking at life through a different lens couldn't be truer for our own Chief Exec at Longhurst Group, Julie Doyle, who's actually Hayley's mum and Harry's grandmother. So I think her very personal experience of having a family member with such challenging disabilities has undoubtedly been a catalyst for Julie wanting to help drive change, not only in our own organisation, but across the sector too. And that's where the pledge really, started life. And it's been quite a fortunate sort of timing through the, awful situation of coronavirus. And as Hayley said, everybody really acknowledging our carers and clapping for them on a weekly basis. It just felt like a really important time for us to do something positive, to better support and improve life for carers. So Julie started to talk to some other organisation, and we started to get the seeds of an idea for a pledge, which was the housing sector to really pledge to better support all carers, including those we employ, those we provide services to, and to improve more general accessibility and disability issues. Lynn said earlier about some of the early adopters, some real key players in our sector came together. So obviously Harry's Pals is one of the founding organisation, but also the Chartered Institute of Housing, the National Housing Federation, Place Shapers, and Carers UK, who've been an important organisation for us to work with too. And it's been, I suppose, quite amazing how it's gathered momentum. I think everybody recognised that this was something that we really haven't tackled as a sector before. And so we started to work with those interested parties and webinars like this early on. And it was literally in weeks, a matter of weeks, through coronavirus, we formed Harry's Pledge. So the pledge was launched during National Carers Week in June. And as both Hayley and Lynn have said, it's gathered such great momentum. We've got over 40 organisations have signed up, which is an absolutely fantastic start. So we hope from today that you'll also be advocates of Harry's Pledge. Hopefully sign up yourself as an organisation, find out more, but certainly spread the word and help us get the message out there. So you may have seen Harry's Pledge, but I just want to talk through the 4 key asks of the pledge. The first one Hayley's touched on already is around carers we employ. So I don't mean paid carers, I mean people like you or me who might also have a caring responsibility at home. And I looked at the latest stats from Carers UK, and it's estimated that 3 in 5 people will be a carer at some point in their life. So that's quite a stark figure, really. It could be us on this virtual sort of roundtable today. So, and 1 in 7 of the workforce are juggling caring and paid employment, and it's estimated that's rapidly increased during the coronavirus. And we know that businesses lose carers because they just can't cope. And another really quite stark figure is that around 250,000 carers left the workplace last year. And Lynn said, a lot of carers are women, a high proportion of carers are women, and they're often at the height of the career, late 40s, and they've just got too much pressure with perhaps being parents of teenage children, also looking after mum and dad or both. So we're losing, a lot of really great people from our businesses. So, there's a moral aspect to this, but also a business imperative to not lose these really great people. So the first ask of the pledge is a commitment to really think about, take stock around how you support the carers that you employ. Is there any more flexibility you can give to the carers that work for you? Whether you know it or not, you'll have carers at Longhurst. That's been our first step on the journey, really identifying who carers are so that we can better support them. The second point is about the offices that we have. The pledge asks people to consider more carefully the office accommodation from a disability perspective, particularly those that are open to the public. Lots of organisations, including Longhurst, are looking at ways of working post-COVID and anticipate more people working from home, and as a result, potentially looking at reconfiguring their offices. And I don't know any housing association officers that sort of I'm aware of that's got the change in places toilets that Hayley's talked about, even though, you know, they are public spaces. So the next ask is about installing change in places toilets in any new offices that you build, but also importantly, if you are looking at remodeling or doing anything with your offices, really think about the option of having change in places toilets. I have to confess, I didn't know about change in places toilets before Harry was born and started to have those conversations and some of the campaign work that Hayley's been doing. But they're basically the same size as a car parking space. So yes, a bit bigger than the usual disabled toilet, but not that much more. But the main thing is that they have a hoist and a bed. And like Hayley said, you know, if you've got a child or an adult that can't use a toilet, you know, you've either got the choice of not going out or the indignity of getting changed on a toilet floor, which most, you know, people have to do. And 1 in 240 people need a change in places toilet. So it's an important issue. And I'm thrilled that, you know, a lot of people who've already signed up to the pledge have said that is something they're going to do in their offices. And we certainly are at Longers too, so that's great. The third ask of the pledge is about the homes that we build and the homes that we already own now as housing associations and local authorities. I appreciate that I'm not exactly sure everybody who's on the call, not everybody may be building new homes, but those that do, we've asked people to really consider, you know, can you build even a small percentage of homes to address disability and accessibility needs? As an example, despite a really rapidly aging population, and there are already 1.2 million people using wheelchairs in the UK, only 1% of new homes outside London are set to be suitable for wheelchair users. So it's an issue that we really need to address as a sector to respond to future housing needs. And we know that there'll always be housing needs and major adaptations for people who are profoundly disabled. But we know people are living longer, they're getting frailer, and lots of people have quite low-level accessibility issues that are just much more simpler to solve. So the pledge is also asking organisations to think about how they design future housing and about the current housing stock and how they can build in more general accessibility as the norm. So success for us involved in the pledge would be when as a sector we perhaps don't even have an AIDS and adaptations budget. We don't need one because those things are mainstreamed into the normal property. So things, for example, that an able-bodied person wouldn't necessarily see or use, but if you had visitors that needed extra support or you did further on, it's just built in. So there'd be second nature things like double glazing. They wouldn't have lots of hoops to get through to get on lists to actually get them. So you've probably heard of them, we're installing things like the invisible adaptations, products you may have seen. The things like plant pots at the front door that look like a plant pot, but it's actually a grab rail, toilet roll holders that are actually grab rails, simple things that make a really big difference and don't actually scream. A vulnerable person actually lives here. So we're just asking the sector to think a bit differently about mainstreaming those sorts of accessibility issues into the housing that they provide. The last point is a really important one, but perhaps, you know, a more difficult nut to crack. And it's about organisations that employ carers, so the paid carers delivering care and support services. You know, and the recognition those carers got during those weekly clapping on the doorsteps just really showed the important job they do. And, you know, although they have such a big responsibility, they're usually paid the minimum wage. The terms and conditions of employment are normally not as favourable as the rest of the organisation, so they're often, you know, sometimes the poor relative. I get why, you know, I get the funding regimes that we operate within. You know, we don't get the funding, and it perhaps wouldn't stack up to be delivering care and support. but we're asking organisations to really work together and support Harry's pledge, to do some more lobbying and campaigning, to be able to make a difference on that one collectively. So those are the 4 elements of the pledge. I think an important thing with the pledge, it's not prescriptive. It doesn't say you have to do X, Y, and Z by a certain date. It's an ask of the sector. There may be some elements that are not relevant to you because you're not a developer or you don't provide care and support services. Undoubtedly, in terms of the employing carers, we will all be employing carers whether we know it or not. So you can still sign up if there's some aspects that work for you. I think I'm gonna end on a short video in a moment, just I suppose to bring the life of carer, which is Hayley and Harry, to life a bit more. I'd like to introduce you to Harry as well, as one of the, he's a real inspiration and the who the pledge is named after. But before I do that, and hopefully Hayley won't blush too much, but I just want to do a shameless plug really. Hayley mentioned the work that she's doing through Harry's Pals to support organisations to really take stock and think, ask themselves, are they being carer-friendly organisation? And she started that work with us at Longhurst, and I know a few other organisations too. Harry's Pals is a really small trust doing some life-changing work, as Hayley's talked about. They've not been able to do a lot of fundraising through coronavirus that they rely on, but there are people who are really relying on the support. So if you wanted or able to support Harry's Pals in any way, we'd love to hear from you. And if you're interested in knowing more about the work that Hayley's doing with organisations, talking to the management team, talking to staff, and honestly to try and get under the skin of what it's like to be a carer employed by an organisation, and then doing a report with recommendations around improvements that could be made for a donation directly to Harry's Pals, then please get in touch. So bear with me, just hopefully the technology is going to work now. I had a lesson in this morning, so bear with me 1 second, talk amongst yourselves, and I'll just see if I can get this to work. Oops, no, hang on 1 sec. Bear with me 1 second, sorry. Apologies, bear with me 1 sec. One thing I haven't done is I haven't done the share screen.
I was just going to say, have you done that then?
It would help matters, wouldn't it? Okay, right. Now you should have my screen.
Yeah, there you go.
Let me just rewind it. Okay. Shout if you can't hear it or anything, and I'll stop and try and get it back.
Harry's 5 years old. He's very smiley little boy that loves cuddles and music, and obviously he's also severely disabled, and that's because Harry suffered strokes prior to being born. So as a result of that, Harry has significant brain damage on both sides of his brain. He's got quadriplegic cerebral palsy, breathing difficulties, he's completely tube fed, immobile, he's got no functional use of his arms and legs. But despite all of that, he does give us lots of smiles, and yeah, you're a little hero, aren't you, Harry? Eh? It's taken me a long while to get to a point where I feel able to start to help to support other families. We've gone through a really difficult 5 years, but as a positive, we have actually learned a lot through the past 5 years, and these are lessons that I feel would be selfish of me not to use to help support other families. So we've set up Harry's Pals because there was a real lack of support for myself, my husband Andy, when Harry was born. There was lots of support for Harry. We were sent home, we had the physio appointments and occupational therapists come in, but there was no support for us as a family in terms of any emotional support.
Hey, just trying to put Harry down for a nap, and I just wanted to give you an example of what it's like when Harry is fighting with sleep. Becomes very unsettled. It's really hard seeing Harry this upset, and it's really unfair.
That's why I think Harry's Pals is going to be so important, because we want to be offering bespoke counselling to families when they need it the most. Having a child with that is severely disabled or ill is very, very hard emotionally. I'm not afraid to admit that I've struggled with anxiety and depression, and I think many carers will also hold their hands up and say that that's been a problem for them too. I think that we need to acknowledge that, you know, carers are the real sort of lifeline throughout our country, and we need to do more to support them.
Thank you. Glad the technology worked in the end. You can't beat a day with a little Harry smile in it. So thanks, Hayley.
Thank you both. Hopefully everybody agrees that not only is Harry a little star, but so is Hayley, and she's doing some absolutely priceless work, and obviously that also kind of reflects into the work that Longhurst are doing to have started to champion this. And I think the last of the kind of session we thought was just to kind of get a view of people around the table of, one, how can we get the message out wider? There's 40 or so organisations, but there needs to be more. Obviously there's the lobbying as well, but also you know, a reflection on how the sector can look at itself and become more carer friendly. What more should we be doing? And I know there's only a few of us here, so just kind of welcome thoughts, and thank both Lynn and Hayley for an inspiring session.
From Aspire, I work at Aspire Housing, and we've signed up to Harry's Pledge, and really proud to do that. I think we've definitely got some work to do to understand exactly what you said, Lynn and Hayley, around how we are currently supporting carers, who our carers are, and I think there's definitely some work to do there. So I'd be interested to have a chat to our HR team, perhaps you, Hayley, on what we can do there. Yeah, I think then it's the change in places toilets, which I've got to be honest, I wasn't aware. You know, certainly the stat of 1 in 240 people have got that requirement, and I'm guessing there's very few across the UK, are there? So yeah, so I think there's a huge amount we can all be doing to campaign with our local partners, our stakeholders. We've all got good, many of us have got good relationships with our local authority partners, local stakeholders in the areas and the community. So I think there's a huge amount we can do on that front as well. And I think that's even before we get to look at you know, the building programme of our own office estate. You know, we've all said that coronavirus has brought changes to the way we work, so that's going to have an impact on our estate and what we do to invest going forward, and also building. So I think there's a huge amount we can do. I think it's looking at a plan as to where to start, and then taking steps to take it forward.
Yeah, I think thank you for that. I think you know, changing places. You talk to people, and a lot of people like I said, I didn't know what it was either. But there are, you know, there's a really strong campaign around changing places. I think, you know, you think, oh well, probably not many people need that, but 1 in 240 is quite a lot. And I can't actually think of any place I've been that's had one. Hayley's better to answer that really in terms of her experience, but I think it makes you know, one of the issues around caring as well is the isolation. People are more likely to suffer mental health issues, and it certainly doesn't help when you think I just can't go out because I can't actually you know, find toilet facilities.
Yeah, it has a massive impact on our lives with Harry, and not being able to go out, and like Lynn says, you do feel isolated. You already feel like you know, everyone else has got these perfect cereal box families and they're able to go to different places, and so to be made to feel you can't join in with them as well because you can't take your child, you know, to change them, or you risk them having to sit in soiled pads all day. It's heartbreaking, really. So, and I imagine I can only imagine how horrid it must be. You know, Harry's cognitively very disabled, so at least he doesn't have to sort of have the indignity of it himself. But for many people, they are very cognitively, you know, like any of us around here. But their body doesn't. You have to be quite physically fit to be able to move yourself onto a toilet from a wheelchair. So in many cases, people aren't able to do that. So they're staying at home. So not only, you know, that having an impact on their mental health, but also has an impact on the carer's mental health and also the carer's well-being. If you're having to pick up a heavy child, you know, Harry's a big boy, and lay them somewhere if there's no hoist, or, you know, put them on the floor. I mean, that's, I don't like putting my bag on the floor, so I certainly want to on the floor. So if it was a case of that, I'd probably be more inclined to stay in, which is a shame, because, so yeah, changing places are definitely they need to be high on the list of priorities, I think, in this country, because there's just not enough at all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we're in a slightly different position because Ellen and Rob and I are all from a law firm, but I think we're interested to have a chat internally about what we can do in terms of supporting, because Rob's our head of CSR. Hayley, I've met you a couple of times, and I was at the launch of Harry's Pals in January, and, you know, it's a cause I'm firmly committed to and really keen to see what we can do. I think there'll be a sponsored event coming our way, but no skydives, thankfully. But we will look at something. But I think we're definitely keen to think about what we can do. I think, you know, a couple of things ring true for us anyway in terms of our role as an employer and our role as, you know, having public premises that people are accessing anyway. And I think I saw the first one of these toilets at the weekend, which I was really surprised at. You know, I'd never seen one before, and it actually made me look at it because I was thinking, what is it, you know? But yeah, really keen to think about what we can do to support.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a really interesting, it was a really interesting thing for us at Longhurst, because, you know, I'm sure like organisations around the table, you know, you work really hard at being a good employer, making sure that you're really flexible policies, but, you know, we, hand on heart, couldn't say we knew exactly who all our carers are. So how on earth could we really support them well when we don't know who they are? So that's been the first step in the journey for us. And also, picking up on something Hayley said, we did some sessions during Carers Week around what is a carer, because a lot of people don't actually identify themselves as carers, because, you know, if you've got a partner that's got you know, disability issues, or, you know, children, or you're looking after elderly parents, you don't always, you know, class yourself as a carer yourself. So that's been sort of part of the start of our journey.
Yeah, and about the timing as well. I mean, I think what you said about the kind of clap for carers is absolutely right, but also we've certainly done more with our staff around, you know, mental well-being and how we support you with kids at home and stuff. And I think the timing fits really well with how can we support you as a carer at home as well, if that's something we can support with. So yeah, so I think
in the coming months.
Yeah,
it definitely links in with the mental health side, because obviously, sadly, people that are, you know, are carers, I think it's like 87% suffer with some sort of mental health problem, you know, anxiety, depression. So now we're talking about mental health more, and we're talking about the importance of carers and how the two fit together. I think it's a really great opportunity to be discussing this.
Yeah,
and how that's supported through as well, through making sure that people are able to stay in their position, so they don't lose the sense of self. I think when you become a carer, you become quite defined by it. So to be able to carry on working and learning how to best approach carers and make sure that they feel like they're able to come and speak to members of staff, that there's a real open door policy and make flexible working hours, and there's so many different ways to support carers and to make them feel that it's just the normal, that we have people within the organisation and some of these are carers, and not to feel beholden because they're a carer, but just to feel that's the policy, that's what they're doing to offer to support carers, and then taking the workplace up on those policies.
I think just kind of from my experience of as my mum, because my mum suffers from dementia, and before she went into a care home I was MD of a company and then became director interim of another company. And my experience there was, obviously as MD, I brought this, I understood that I needed support, so kind of also made sure my staff got support. But when I moved to the interim position, I was really lucky that I worked for an organisation and a chief exec that when my phone rang and I saw it was my mum, I needed to answer the phone, even if we were in a high, kind of highfalutin kind of meeting, because she suffered from kind of an anxiety of being on her own. So her escape from that when she got really down in the early stages was to ring us. And if we didn't answer, we know that she would go and wander around the street. So we needed to answer the phone. And I was so lucky that I could do 18 months being supported by an organisation that understood that even though I was a director, I just needed that flexibility. Sometimes I'd be driving to work, get a call, have to turn around, not being able to go into work as I planned, but doing the extra work to make up when I missed a bit. And so I think there's the kind of two ends of the spectrum, and the mental health part was really hard. One, admitting that I had got a mum with disabilities and an issue of dementia that would get worse. And it was really important to me that I did carry on to work initially. I'm really thankful that I worked for organisations that did support that, but I think there's not enough, I don't think, around the sector. And if I'd been quiet about the caring issues I'd have probably struggled even in the organisations I worked in. But I was kind of confident enough to say, I need your support because I've got to do this. And I think that's the trust that organisations have got to have, which is your point about finding out who your carers are and saying, we will support, you need to tell us.
I think it's really good to hear your stories though as well, because I wonder, I mean, like you said, Hayley, I wonder how many people don't want to ask for help or think that, this is part of my role as a mum or as a daughter or whatever, and don't want to hold their hand up and say, actually, I could do some support. And I think sometimes hearing those stories from you two, it kind of, so Hayley, I know for me, it made me think about, I'm not in the situation of a carer, but with my kids, I would not want to put my kid onto a floor and change their nappy. And I've been in that situation where you get rubbish baby changing facilities, amplify that by 1,000 when you've got a 5-year-old you're trying to pick up. I think that's, it kind of makes it more real to you, doesn't it?
And that's one of the things we started doing during Carers Week is asking staff to tell the stories. So we had staff who were, and Hayley sort of helped as well, but staff at Longhurst were telling their own stories about caring and the difficulties and the challenges and some of the things that were helpful for that the organisation did. So I think it's just getting out there really and sharing stories and so that it's, as Hayley said, it's just part of the normal conversation. I remember talking to Hayley about carers and employment, and she said there is you know, she can't, you sort of can't go and work, can you, at the moment, Hayley? You know, sort of, and obviously you're putting all your energy into the sort of Harry's Pals work, but you know, she said that you know, she feels there's a stigma. So, you know, if she said I'm a carer, you know, would that be frowned upon as an organisation? So, them being really explicit that, you know, this is the support you get, and you're not on the back foot having to ask for stuff all the time, I think is really important.
Yeah, just making it the normal culture of the organisation and how it operates, and making sure that's really clear to people, so that when I put my CV in, and when I introduce myself and I say I've got a son that's got severe disabilities, I'm not going to feel that that's going to put me at a disadvantage compared to somebody else that's got similar qualifications to myself. And if anything, they might think, well, you know, you're a carer, and that gives you yourself that you can do this and this, and you know, you've got a whole other skill set. So and I think there's work to be done, but I do think now's the time that we can make all these changes.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left of the session, but if everybody's kind of had their say, happy to kind of end it. I think the way that you get involved is, let me flash my screen, with the pledge, is to go to www.harrys-pledge.org.uk. So obviously encourage people to do that, but also spread the word, retweet anything that is put out by Harry's Pals and the Harry's Pledge. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And if you just put Harry's Pledge in the, you know, Google it, it should come up. But yeah, and if there's, you know, there's any more conversations you want with Hayley and I, just please feel free to get in touch.
And thank you, everyone. I thought it was a great session. It was really, really interesting for me. So
yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.